Alright, welcome back. This is a review for Fruits Basket Season 2, Episode 19/44. So this episode kind of wraps up the rest of Reen's little backstory. I mean, and it was kind of wrapped up last episode, but kind of the conclusion of where we kind of left her off at in Sugar's house. But this episode is just as it's just about as much as about Tohru as it is about Reen, and you'll kind of get that, especially in the later half of the episode with Tohru's stuff. But the episode, Reen wakes up and of course she sees Tohru. And she visualizes her as her mother first, and then she realizes, oh, it's Tohru, which we'll get into that. Tohru goes and gets Hattori and Shigure, and they explain, you transformed into a horse, we let you rest, but we really need to take you to the hospital. And she tries to escape, but Tohru's like, no, don't, stay here. And then we briefly get, very briefly we get a little thing with Yuki and Reen, where Yuki comes up and he's like, hey, Reen, I just wanted to tell you that Haru still loves you. He loves you very much, and she doesn't really respond back. But that's about it. Besides telling him that not to tell Haru that she was there, and he's just like, well, I mean, he said that you can manage on your own, so I'm not really worried about that. But then we get a very short, brief conversation between Hattori and Shigure as they're kind of leaving. And Hattori's like, hey, Shigure, Reen came here for a reason. I don't think she just came here at Reen. I'm pretty sure she came here to see you and talk to you about something. And Shigure's like, yeah, you kind of called me out on it. Yeah, she came here to ask me if I knew how to break the curse, because that's what she's trying to figure out how to do. Which absolutely shocks Hattori, because he's like, wait, what? She's trying to break the curse? That's a very ludicrous idea to try to do. It's what? And Sugar's like, yeah, it is kind of, but is it really though? Is it really though? And he's like, and Tori's like, what are you talking about? He's so confused. And Sugar's like, yeah, don't you hear that sound? And Tori's like, what sound? And Sugar's like, the sound of breaking. And it's like, ugh. Shigure, why? Why do you gotta be so mysterious? Why do you gotta be so cunning in your little weird, mysterious sayings? Anyway, we'll jump over back to mainly about Reen. Where Tohru comes in and she's talking with Reen, and Reen immediately is like, hey, you shouldn't, stop trying to break the curse. I know that's what you talked to Kazuma about. Just stay out of this, stay out of this. It's none of your business. And she thinks to herself, I don't like it when, because she vaguely remembered prior to this, that, she didn't want to meet Tohru in the first place, because, she was trying to avoid meeting Tohru because Haru had told her about her, and she knew that from his description that, oh, she's a kind person, and she's like, well, I don't want to be near her, because I don't want Haru involved, and I don't want other people involved. I don't want her involved. And so what she says can kind of come off as very abrasive in terms of how she puts things. But even she says, this is the only way I know how to be able to put this. I don't want her to get involved with this stuff. I don't want to see her hurt. I don't want to see kind people get hurt. And Tohru was like, wait, you're trying to break the curse too? Hey, tell me what you know. And Reen's like, no, stop, go away, don't meddle. And then you get, I love it so much. It's Tohru, you get strong-willed Tohru that she's like, no, I'm not. I will keep on meddling. She's like, I have things that I wanted that are important to me too, and that I can't just let go of. And it's such a good scene because, again, it's such a great little character moment for Tohru, because if you think that Tohru is just like, oh, she's, again, just like with the, back in the True Form arc, if you think that she's just going to be a pushover, be like, oh, she'll do whatever she's told, And like in other series, like it'd be like, oh, the main character gets told off saying, oh, don't do it, and they might get depressed or whatever, and like get down, and then they'll either have to regain their own courage to try to continue doing whatever it is that they're doing, or they'll secretly try to do it. Tohru just outright says, no, I don't care if I get punished, I don't care if I get hurt, I will meddle in this because I care about you people, and I want to help you guys. And it's so good. Then they also get there's a little funny scene in there with Tohru is legit having an argument with Rin, and it's like you wouldn't expect that from this sort of character, for this very kind and very sweet character to have like a straight up argument, a yelling match with another character. And so you get Kyo and Yuki come out of their rooms and they're standing in the hallway like, should we do something about this? I don't know. But Rin, she's yelling at Tohru, and like, she eventually just says, there's just no way. There's no way to break the curse. I can't find any, and I can't, and of course she refers to Haru, and she's like, I can't free him like this, So she runs out of the room, and Tohru follows her, and you get more of Rin as she's running, and she's like, I didn't want to meet her because pretty much, again, I didn't want kind people to get hurt, but then the first time I saw her, I knew instantly that I just had this impulse come over me because the way that she seemed and looked and acted and everything, that just her entire present, her entire being is just someone who I feel like I could just run up to, and I could put my head on her lap or put my head on her shoulder and just cry and tell her all my worries and pain and sorrow and everything, and that she would not only forgive me for these things, but she would also accept them. And she's like, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to hurt people I don't want to hurt kind people, especially someone like you have someone like me who I lean on and I yearn for, and I tend to use kind people a lot, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to hurt these people, and not only thinking of Tohru but also thinking of Haru. I don't want them to get hurt. Again, that's partially just because of how even her abusive childhood is, and that she thinks it's her fault. She thinks everything is to blame, and she doesn't want, even if she ends up with nothing in the end, even if she's the only one who gets hurt, she'd rather be it that way than have people who she'd rather be it that way than have other people get hurt. And so she's sitting there on the steps up to the Shigure's house because she kind of tripped. And she's going, I promised myself I wouldn't cry. I promised myself I would do this on my own. I promised myself I wouldn't care what other people thought, that I would, or if they tried to interfere, I was going to do this all by myself. And then Tohru kind of comes up, and she just sits next to her, and she's like, she barely even gets a chance to touch her. I don't think she actually gets to touch her. And then Rin just turns around, and she's like, I'm sorry, but I'm going to lean on you. I'm going to have to, I'm going to need your help because I don't know what to do anymore. I don't know where to go. I don't know how to save Haru. I don't know how to break the curse. I don't know what to do anymore, and I'm scared. And Tohru, and of course she says some of this out loud to Tohru. Some of this she's thinking of it. She says out loud. But Tohru just embraces her, and, she says, and Tohru thinks of her own past, and she goes, yeah, it's scary being by yourself. It's scary being alone. And she just hugs Rin, and it's such a beautiful moment. And then you get the other thing that Shigure says, which is that, Rin should have really just let Tohru care for her in the first place, or just let herself be cared for in the first place. And then Shigure says, it's not, you can let yourself be cared for, but what's more important is what you choose to do afterwards. Will you continue to be cared for, or, and he doesn't finish the sentence, but you kind of know where he's going with it, which is that, or will you actually stand up for yourself? Not stand up for yourself, but will you actually start building on your own, and once you've had enough care, will you actually be able to stand up on your own and start moving forward? Or will you continue to not be cared for and, ignore everything and try to do stuff on your own even when you shouldn't be, when you and not rely on other people. And Yuki, you know, he sees this. He sees Tohru embracing Rin, and he thinks, yeah, you know what? There's something that I realize that there's one thing for sure that me and Rin have in common, and it's something that both me and Rin have really desired for a long time. And I forgot to mention this earlier because we kind of take a little mini break here. I forgot to mention this earlier, but this is kind of the way that they did this episode. I kind of figured that they would, because this is chapters 80 and 82, if I remember correctly. And in that very small smidgen of a scene where Yuki and Haru and then Kakeru show up and they're at school, that is actually chapter 81. And I figured kind of that they probably would put that in there just because of Yuki's dialogue kind of flows into that, as well as our inner monologue, and just kind of to wrap it up with Haru and being like, oh, Haru visited Rin in the hospital. So you kind of wrap up the Rin and Haru a little bit relationship, kind of. Not wrap it up, but just kind of, you know, kind of settle things a little bit. So next episode should be 81, the rest of 81, and 83. Anyway, so that's where that scene comes in, and it's a funny little scene. It's good. But then we get the second half of the episode, which is Tohru's visiting Rin in the hospital, and she even makes her jello, which is very sweet, because that's, you know, that's just Tohru. And she like gives Rin the jello, and Rin just like, I'm pretty sure I know why you're here. You're here to talk about the curse. And Tohru's like, oh, I mean, I kind of forgot about that. Whoops. But Rin explains, you know, or they go kind of for a little walk, and Tohru says, hey, you know, Akito told me that, you know, everyone, that the curse is enduring, that everyone will return to him once everyone graduates high school, and that, you know, they'll always be together. And Rin says, yeah, so according to, not really according to, but she says, you know, we don't know exactly how old the story is, but, you know, it's, you know, hundreds of generations ago or so, and the legend is that, or the story is that, you know, God made a promise to all the animals that they'd always be together, that even if they died, they'd be able to meet up again and whatnot. And she says, you know, while on the surface level, and even to an outsider, and even initially, that's a beautiful thing, you know, to always be together, to always have the people that you want around you. But when it becomes a thing where you don't want those people around you anymore, or you want to move on with your life, it becomes a bind, it becomes a chain, it becomes, as she says, a curse. It becomes something that you don't want, and having to always be together can become something that's problematic. And she says, well, I tried asking, you know, Shigure, but he says he doesn't know anything about it, and I doubt, and even if Akito does know something about it, I doubt he would tell me. And Dora's like, oh, what about Kureno? And she's like, well, I don't really trust him, and he's always with Akito anyway, so I don't really count him as one of us, so just don't bother, just don't worry about him. And Tora's like, well, I'm gonna go see Kureno, because, you know, she feels it, because she's like, no, I don't think he's a bad person, you know, because she wants him and Uo to get together. Rin's like, no, just don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Don't try going off and seeing him on your own or whatever. But then Rin asks her, hey, like, what is it that's, you know, what is it that you can't give up? What is it that's most precious to you? Why are you trying to break the curse? And Toru's like, oh, and she's about to answer, but then she kind of stops and she thinks of Akito, or at least there's an image in her pops in her mind that's of Akito, but they didn't actually get the dialogue for it, but it's something that Akito says during. If you match back up with that scene, what went down during that scene in the beach arc, you'll know what kind of Toru's thought process is here. And she stops herself, and Rin's like, hell, Rin herself is kind of surprised that Toru's like not answering. But Rin's like, hey, you know, just don't worry about it. You can tell me later, or whatever. And they, you know, that kind of wraps up that little scene. You get two little interesting. You get Reen back in the hospital. She's kind of having this monologue. She's going, I think that she needs, just like how there was someone for me that helped me to um, kind of come to terms with things and be able to move on. In this case, it was Haru. Haru was there for me to support me, and was someone I could trust. I hope that one day she will have someone similar, someone that will be there for her, and that someone that she can lean on and be supported by as well. Because she mentions kind of as like one of the last things that pops up is that people who are lonely, people who've experienced loneliness, can't help but love other people. And then you kind of getting this mixed in with Tohru's little flashback where she's having a dream about her mother, about the day that her mother left when she died. And actually, hang on, let me pause this because I forgot to mention that Reen, if it wasn't obvious, Reen kind of, especially because Reen keeps the flashes of Reen seeing Tohru, but she also sees her mom earlier. It's pretty obvious that Reen sees Tohru as a mother figure in her life. Again, she even said that she was gonna run. She felt like she could run up to her and just cry to her like a little kid to a mom. Anyway, going back to Tohru, I just wanted to mention that because I almost forgot that. But jumping back to Tohru, she has this. She remembers. She's kind of dreaming about the day that her mom left and died, and she's like trying to wake herself up. She's like, no, she's leaving. She's like, I gotta wake up. I gotta wake up. Don't go, mom. And then her mom shuts the door, and Tohru, reaches out and she wakes up from the dream, and she goes, oh, I'm back in Shigure's house, and you see her at the very end, like open up the door, and she's kind of like this half dazed, kind of almost very like lifeless Tohru, which is very kind of shocking. Opening up the door and being like, we'll be together always, and she shuts it and she leaves. And she goes back to bed. But we're starting to see Tohru kind of, I wouldn't say break as a character, but we're starting to see the cracks in her character. We're starting to see that she isn't this always cheerful, happy-go-lucky character that she's, I mean, it's kind of been a little bit obvious a little bit before, but now it's really starting to become obvious that she herself has her own issues of which she hasn't fully dealt with yet. In this case, it's issues with the fact that she really hasn't let go of her mom, and that she really hasn't accepted her mother's death yet, and she's not letting herself move on from that. And you kind of get a tie between the curse in throughout Fruits Basket in general it stands for a lot of different things, but one of the things, and it can mean different things to different characters, but in Tohru's case, because she's always thinking back to when it references the curse and that it's supposed to be a sacred bond and all this, she always thinks back to her mother, and that her bond with her mother is supposed to be something special. But in this case, and it's not her mom's fault, it's just that Tohru's love for her mom is not really letting her move on from her mother, because or I should say, it's not really letting her mourn for her mother, because she needs to do that. She needs to be able to mourn for her mother in order to be able to move on with her life. But she's kind of struggling to do that, because again, it's very symbolic of the curse, of the entirety of the bond. But again, just like how we're getting to see Tohru starting to little cracks in her character, and it kind of started with the beach arc, but with what Hiro said, but it's definitely building off of that. And which Hiro's not a bad kid for saying that. He's just saying what he said. But Tohru's starting to realize that there may be someone or something that's more precious to her than her mother is, which is kind of why it shocked her. And then you get her having this dream, and she's like, she's starting to realize that there's something more important to her than her mother. But now she has this dream, and that's like representing of her, mother leaving, and she doesn't want her mother to leave yet. She's really struggling with the fact that she's starting to consider someone or something more important to her than her mother, and she doesn't she doesn't know what to do with that at the moment. She doesn't know how to process it, and she's scared of her mother leaving her. And it's so good. It's because, again, I know there are people who are always, even back in the old days. I say the old days, but back when it was just the original series, and all we had was the original series. Among the people would be like, "Oh, Tohru was just some Mary Sue character, and she's always happy-go-lucky. Everything always works out for her, or whatever." But it's like, no, Tohru, and that what her problems are really aren't that much of a problem. And it's like, no, Tohru has problems. She has issues. She is her own character, and she's not just a one note. We saw in this episode that, yeah, she's a very strong and she's a very sweet character. She's very kind. She's very caring. She's very motherly, but she can also be stubborn, and she can also be very strong-willed, and she's not a pushover. But at the same time, well, all amongst that, she also has her own issues, and that she is struggling with, and it's so good. It's so good. I'm just so happy that we're finally getting these sorts of things animated, because, again, it's nice to be able to have these things to point out to people who had only ever seen the original series, and be able to say, no, Tohru isn't that way, and you can actually show it to them in the new anime, and it makes me so happy. Anyway, this video's gone on long enough. I did not intend it to be this long. Anyway, so next episode, I cannot wait for, this is one of the big moments I have been waiting for to happen next episode. Oh my gosh, I am so excited. Okay, anyway, so that's about it. So, thanks for watching, and bye for now.